I was sitting on a plastic chair outside a small pharmacy in the Philippines, waiting for my wife's prescription to be filled, when I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had felt this relaxed. Not relieved. Not on vacation. Just relaxed. Like the background noise in my head that had been running for 30 years had finally gone quiet. I remember looking up at the sky, watching a couple of kids kick a ball around in the street, and thinking about how different everything looked from where I was sitting. Because 2 years earlier, I was sitting in a completely different chair, in a completely different state of mind, in a life that looked fine from the outside but felt, if I'm being honest, like it was slowly grinding me down. My name is Arthur. I'm 63 years old, retired, and for most of my adult life I did what most men my age did. I worked, I provided, I showed up. I spent 31 years as a high school history teacher in Central Ohio, and I was proud of that. I genuinely was. But teaching in America today is not what teaching was when I started. The paperwork, the testing requirements, the budget cuts, the meetings that didn't need to be meetings. By the time I got to my late 50s, I wasn't burning out. I had already burned out. I was just going through the motions and hoping nobody noticed. My wife, Donna, had worked at a medical billing office for most of her career. She retired a year before I did. When I finally handed in my resignation letter, we were both looking at the same thing: a fixed income, a house that needed work, and a retirement that didn't look the way we had imagined it when we were younger. We weren't extravagant people. We never had been. We didn't take expensive trips. We drove older cars. We cooked at home almost every night. But somewhere around 2022, something started happening to our monthly numbers that I couldn't explain away anymore. The grocery bill was the first thing I noticed. I had always been the one who handled the shopping. Donna hated it, so I took it on years ago, and it became my thing. Tuesday mornings, I'd drive to the Kroger about a mile from our house, walk the same aisles in the same order, buy mostly the same things we always bought: chicken, ground beef, eggs, whatever vegetables were on sale, bread, some fruit. Nothing fancy, nothing unusual. The same cart I had been filling for 20 years. But the total at the register kept climbing. At first I thought I was imagining it. Then I thought it was temporary. I remember standing at the checkout line one Tuesday and watching the number tick up on the screen, and when the cashier said the total, I genuinely asked her to repeat it. $286. For 1 week. For 2 people. I pushed the cart to the car and sat there for a minute before I started the engine. I wasn't angry. I was confused. I kept trying to figure out what I had bought that was so expensive. I went through the receipt line by line in the parking lot. There wasn't anything extravagant on there. A rotisserie chicken, a bag of oranges, some yogurt, a few frozen meals for the nights when neither of us felt like cooking, regular items. Things I had been buying for years. That afternoon I got home and started going back through our bank statements for the previous 6 months. I'm not a finance guy, I never claimed to be, but I can read a spreadsheet, and what I saw made me sit back in my chair and stare at the wall for a little while. Our grocery spending had gone up almost 40% in 18 months. I showed Donna that evening. She looked at the numbers the same way I had, quiet. Not panicked, just the look you get when something confirms what you already suspected but didn't want to say out loud. We started tracking things more carefully after that, not obsessively, just paying closer attention to where the money was going. And the picture that emerged over the next couple of months wasn't one single problem. It was a lot of small things that had all gotten bigger at the same time: electricity, home insurance, property taxes. The car needed new tires. The water heater was making a noise it hadn't made before. The furnace had been serviced twice in a year. Every month there was something. We had savings. I want to be clear about that. We weren't in crisis. But retirement is supposed to be the part where you stop running. And what I found myself doing, instead, was running harder than ever, just to stay in the same place. I remember one night in February, sitting at the kitchen table with a legal pad, writing down our monthly income on one side and our monthly expenses on the other. I did the math 3 times because I didn't trust the first 2 answers. When all the numbers settled, we had about $400 left over at the end of each month. After everything, after the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the insurance premiums, the medications, $400. Donna looked at it and said, "That's not a retirement, that's a budget." She was right, and I didn't have anything to say back. I'm not sure exactly when I first heard people talking about moving abroad in retirement. It might have been a podcast. It might have been something I stumbled across online one night. Wherever it came from, the idea didn't stick at first. It seemed like something for a certain type of person. Adventurous people, younger people, people who had nothing tying them down. That wasn't us. We had a house. We had routines. We had a dog named Biscuit who was 11 years old and set in his ways. We had a daughter, Erin, about 45 minutes away in Columbus, and a son-in-law, Mark, and 2 grandkids who I coach soccer for on Saturday mornings. I was not thinking about moving to another country. But then one evening I was looking for something to watch, and I came across a video of a retired couple walking through an outdoor market somewhere in the Philippines. The wife was holding a pineapple and laughing at something her husband had said. The husband was haggling over the price of mangoes with a vendor who was smiling right back at him. It was maybe 3 minutes long. I watched the whole thing, then went back and watched it again. I don't know what it was about that video. There was nothing dramatic in it. Nobody was making big claims. Nobody was holding up a chart or telling me I needed to change my life. It was just 2 people doing their grocery shopping, except they were doing it in flip-flops, in January, in a place that looked like it had never heard of a furnace bill. I watched another video, and then another. I stayed up until midnight watching videos about retired Americans living in the Philippines, and I went to bed thinking about it, and I woke up still thinking about it. Over breakfast the next morning, I mentioned it to Donna, very casually, like I was reading something out of the newspaper. She put her coffee cup down and looked at me. "The Philippines?" she said. "I'm just saying it's interesting." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she asked me to show her what I had been watching. That was probably the moment things started shifting, even though neither of us would have called it that then. We just watched a few videos together. We didn't talk about moving. We didn't make any plans. But the question was there now, sitting quietly at the kitchen table with us. The next few weeks, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in a long time. I started reading, not history textbooks, not the news. I started reading about what life actually cost in different parts of the Philippines. I started looking up healthcare, which mattered to us, because we're both at the age where healthcare matters. I started looking up what other retirees had done, practically speaking. How had they handled it? What did they wish they had known? What did they regret? I read a lot of things that were too optimistic. I read a few things that were too discouraging. But somewhere in the middle, a realistic picture started taking shape. And the more the picture came into focus, the harder it was to ignore. Our combined monthly income, between my pension and Social Security, was around $3,400. In Ohio, that left us with $400 of breathing room every month. According to everything I was reading, in a mid-sized city in the Philippines, $3,400 a month didn't just cover things. It changed things entirely. I remember printing out a rough budget breakdown I had put together one afternoon and laying it on the kitchen counter for Donna. Rent for a furnished 2-bedroom apartment in a decent part of Dumaguete or Cagayan de Oro, somewhere between $350 and $550 a month. Groceries for 2, $150 to $200, buying mostly local. Utilities, $60 to $90. We'd need private health insurance since Medicare doesn't work overseas, but international health coverage for 2 people in their 60s was running between $250 and $350 a month, which was less than what we were already paying for supplemental coverage in Ohio. Eating out, transportation, incidentals, maybe another $200 to $300. Total estimated monthly spending, around $1,500 to $1,900. That would leave us somewhere between $1,900 and $2,100 every month that we could either save, travel with, or simply breathe with. Donna looked at those numbers for a long time. Then she looked at me. "Is this real?" she said. Not skeptical, just genuine, like she wanted permission to believe it. "I think it might be," I said. That night, we had the first real conversation about it. Not a what-if conversation, an actual conversation. We talked about Erin and the grandkids. We talked about Biscuit, who we eventually realized we could bring with us, though it would take some planning. We talked about the things we'd miss, because we knew we'd miss things. Our church, the neighbors we'd had for 20 years, the familiarity of the town where we'd raised our kids and taught and lived the whole shape of our adult lives. We talked about all of it, and then we sat quietly for a while. At some point, Donna said, "I feel like we earned the right to actually live, not just get by." I knew what she meant. That was exactly what it felt like, getting by. Month after month, year after year, trimming things here, adjusting things there, doing the math over and over, never really getting ahead. I was 63, Donna was 6. We weren't old, but we weren't young either, and time has a way of making itself known the older you get. I didn't want to spend the next decade managing our money every single month and calling that a retirement. We kept talking about it, on and off, for several more weeks. There were nights when it seemed completely obvious that we should do it, and there were mornings when I woke up convinced I had talked myself into something foolish. The doubt wasn't about the Philippines. The doubt was about change itself. At 63, change doesn't come easy. Your roots go deep, whether you mean for them to or not, and you start wondering honestly whether you're brave enough to pull them up. The conversation with Erin was the one I had been dreading. We told her on a Sunday afternoon when she and Mark came over for lunch. I had been rehearsing what I was going to say for about a week. As it turned out, I didn't say it the way I practiced. I just told her the truth. I told her what the numbers looked like. I told her what I had been researching. I told her we weren't running away from anything. We were trying to run toward something. A life that still had room in it. She didn't say anything right away. Mark, to his credit, asked good practical questions. Flights back to visit. How often could we come home? What would we do if one of us got sick? I answered what I could. I told them honestly what I didn't know yet. Erin was quiet for most of it. Then she said, "Dad, I just don't want you to go. That one hit harder than I expected. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. This is my daughter. These are my grandkids. I coached their soccer games. I drove them home from school when Erin needed help. I was the person they called when something broke in the house at 10 o'clock at night. Being far away from that is not a small thing. It's not a thing you file away and forget about. It stays with you." I told her I loved her. I told her we weren't disappearing. We'd be back for the holidays. She could visit us. We'd be on video calls more than she probably wanted. And I told her something that I needed to believe myself. That watching her parents struggle financially for the next 20 years, just to stay geographically close, wasn't good for any of us. She cried a little. I probably did too, though I'd rather not confirm that on camera. A few weeks later, she called me on a Wednesday evening. She had been doing her own research, she said. She had found some videos and articles from other families who had done this. She had looked into flight prices between Columbus and the Philippines. She said, "You have to promise me you'll come home for Christmas." I promised. Then she said, "Okay, Dad, then go do it." The next few months were a blur in the most literal sense. We found renters for the house. We sold what we could, gave away what we couldn't sell, and put the rest in storage. I spent 3 weekends reading about the SRRV, the Special Resident Retiree's Visa, which turned out to be a reasonably straightforward process for someone our age who could show a steady pension income and meet the deposit requirement. We found an agent in Cagayan de Oro who helped us locate apartments to look at. We booked flights. We arranged the vet paperwork to bring Biscuit along, which involved more documentation than either of us had for ourselves. I remember the last night in the house. Donna and I sat on the back porch after the movers had left. The house was empty. Our voices echoed when we talked. Biscuit was curled up on the only blanket we hadn't packed, looking at us like he was trying to figure out what was happening. I wasn't sure what I felt. It wasn't sadness exactly. It wasn't regret. It was something that didn't have a clean name. The weight of 30 years lived in a place, all settling onto you at once as you get ready to leave it. Donna reached over and held my hand. "We made a good life here," she said. "We did," I said. "Now let's go make another one." The flight to Cagayan de Oro, with a layover in Manila, took the better part of a day and a half. Biscuit made it through in the cargo hold, and when we picked him up at the other end, he was stressed and confused but physically fine. The drive from the airport into the city gave us our first real look at the place, and I remember sitting in the back of the van with my face practically pressed to the window like I was 12 years old again on a family road trip. It was loud. It was colorful. There were motorcycles and tricycles everywhere. Street vendors had set up along the road, palm trees and concrete and cheerful signage and more activity than I had seen in any single place in recent memory. After the quiet predictability of our street in Ohio, it felt like someone had turned all the dials up to full. I didn't dislike it. I was just trying to absorb it. The first apartment we had lined up wasn't quite right, but the second one was a furnished two-bedroom on the third floor of a quiet building near a park. Clean, well-maintained, good cross-ventilation because Donna runs warm and doesn't love air conditioning. The landlord, a soft-spoken man named Renato, spoke clear English and turned out to be one of the more helpful people we would meet in that first year. The rent was 26,000 pesos a month, which at the time worked out to about $460. Those first weeks, I did the same thing Donna had done back in the Philippines videos I'd been watching. I compared everything to home. It's almost impossible not to. You walk into a grocery store and you're immediately scanning for the things that feel familiar, measuring prices against what you remember paying, trying to figure out where you stand. I remember the first time I went to a local market on my own. It was a Saturday morning. Donna was tired from the adjustment, so I said I'd go and see what I could find. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I walked around for probably 40 minutes before I bought anything. Vegetables laid out on tables, fish packed in ice that had clearly been caught very recently, people buying and talking and bargaining and laughing. A kind of organized noise that was nothing like a Kroger on a Tuesday morning, but that had its own rhythm once you settled into it. I bought tomatoes, sweet peppers, a kilo of bangus, which is a local fish Renato had recommended, some bananas that looked better than any bananas I could remember from home. The total came out to about 350 pesos. I did the conversion in my head on the walk back, $6.20. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment doing that math again, making sure I hadn't made a mistake. I hadn't. I texted Donna, "You're not going to believe what I just spent." Life settled in gradually after that, the way it does when you give it enough time. The first month was disorienting. The second month was more manageable. By the third month, we had routines. The market on Saturday mornings became mine, like Kroger used to be, except the experience was entirely different. I started recognizing faces. A vendor named Lito always saved me the good fish when he saw me coming. The woman at the vegetable stall where I bought my tomatoes started teaching me a few words in Visayan, which made her laugh every single time I tried to use them. Biscuit, for his part, adjusted faster than either of us. He had a whole park to investigate every morning, and within 2 weeks he had a full social calendar of neighbors who snuck him treats. The healthcare question, which had worried me the most going in, turned out to be more manageable than I feared. We enrolled in a private international health plan that covered both of us for around $310 a month, which was actually less than our supplemental Medicare premium back home. We found an English-speaking family doctor near our building for routine visits, and when Donna needed a dental procedure about 4 months in, the cost came to about 1/10 of what she would have paid in Ohio. About 6 months after we arrived, I sat down and did the actual math on what we had spent since landing. Rent, $460 a month. Groceries and market, right around $180. Utilities, including internet fast enough to video call Aaron without it cutting out, about $80. Health insurance, $310. Eating out a few times a week, which we do because the food is genuinely wonderful and also inexpensive, about $150. Transportation, the occasional trip somewhere, personal spending, maybe $200 more. Total, approximately $1. $380 a month. On a $3D $400 income, that left us with just over $2,000 every month. I hadn't had $2,000 left over at the end of a month since I was in my 40s, and even then it had felt temporary. I'm not going to tell you everything is perfect here, because it isn't. I have bad days. There are things I miss. I miss Aaron. I miss my grandkids with an ache that doesn't go away, and no number of video calls completely fills that space. I miss watching them play soccer on Saturday mornings. I miss driving around in the fall when the leaves change color in Ohio, which sounds small, but it's not. I miss certain foods that just don't exist here, or that cost too much to import to make sense. I miss being in a place where I understand all the rules without having to think about them. Some practical things are harder than expected. Power outages happen more often than they did at home. Traffic in the city follows its own logic that took me a long time to understand. Certain things take longer to sort out simply because systems work differently here. I have had frustrating days. I have had days when I wondered what we were thinking. But then I have days like the one I described at the beginning, sitting outside that pharmacy, watching the kids play in the street, feeling the kind of quiet that I hadn't known was missing until I found it again. I stopped counting the months we'd been here around the 7-month mark, not because I lost track, but because it stopped feeling like something I needed to track. We weren't visiting. We weren't testing it out. We were living here, in the way you live somewhere when it becomes yours. I video call Aaron every Sunday evening. We've already booked our first trip home for Christmas, which is something I'm looking forward to more than I can adequately express. She and Mark are planning to come visit us in February, and I have already started making a list of things I want to show them. The market, the park where Biscuit holds court every morning, a waterfall about 45 minutes outside the city that I found on a half-day trip a couple months ago. My pension and Social Security still come in every month, the same as always. The difference is what's left over when the month ends. The difference is waking up on a Tuesday and not immediately doing arithmetic in my head. The difference is that Donna and I went out to dinner on a Thursday for no particular reason, and the bill for both of us, including drinks and dessert, was $11, and neither one of us looked at each other with that familiar mix of pleasure and guilt. We just ate the food and talked and watched the street outside and felt like people who had been given something back. I spent 31 years teaching young people about history, and one thing I always tried to tell them was that the most important decisions rarely feel decisive when you're making them. They just feel like the next step, a small shift that turns out, later, to have changed the direction of everything. Leaving Ohio felt like the biggest thing I had ever done. Some days it still does. But mostly, when I look back at the choice Donna and I made, sitting at that kitchen table with a legal pad and a grocery receipt, and the particular kind of tiredness that comes from working hard at something for a very long time, what I feel is grateful. Grateful that we asked the question. Grateful that we took the numbers seriously. Grateful that Erin, in the end, gave us her blessing instead of her argument, and grateful that Biscuit, who is now 12 years old and moves a little slower than he used to, gets to spend his last good years sniffing around a park in the Philippines with a fish vendor named Lito sneaking him scraps on Saturday mornings. That's not a bad retirement. That's not a bad life at all.